month of October, entertain a motion that we need to go into closed session to discuss personnel issues. Anything else besides personnel?
Kitty, you got anything?
No,
Okay.
that's all.
You want me to say it?
Go ahead.
For North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11, make a motion that the board enter a closed session to discuss personnel issues and to preserve the attorney-client privilege.
Second.
Motion second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then we'll go into closed session then.
buy some property in Haiti, some said.
Before we give our formal welcome tonight, let me ask for a motion for the board to go back into open session.
Make a motion, the board goes back into open session.
Second, sir.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Again, we'd like to welcome all of you here tonight to our October meeting of the Iredell-Statesville Schools Board of Education. I'll ask that you join me in a moment of silence as we generally begin our meetings, asking each one to meditate in your own way for the first few moments, asking for guidance in the operations that we do and decisions that we make, and helping us to keep those in the best interest of the children and of our school system. So if you will, bow with me. Thank you. At this point, let's stand for the presentation of the colors from the South Iredell Marine Corps JROTC, and we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance when they present the colors. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Begin our meeting with the consent agenda. We have first, under the administration portion, the item A, the vehicle purchase of a boom platform truck. Dr. Miller.
Thank you, Dr. Cash, members of the board, Mr. Johnson. Yes, as we discussed at the CAL meeting, we are purchasing replacement for our existing boom truck or platform truck, which is outdated and we've had for over 30 years. Just for disclosure purposes, this piece of equipment typically would be about $250,000, $250,000. We're purchasing a used piece of equipment at $110,000. We've been looking for 2 years for the right piece of equipment. We feel like this is the one that we need to purchase, and I would ask for approval of the purchase. We do have it in our budget this year in our capital outlay. Be glad to answer any questions.
Questions or comments for Dr. Miller? Thank you. Next, we have the personnel items on the consent agenda, items B, C, D, E, and F. The acceptance of resignations, retirements, rehires, terminations, and leaves of absence, the approval of classified personnel, approval of licensed personnel, approval of administrative appointments, and approval of reinstated personnel. Dr. Lassane.
Okay. Dr. Cash, Mr. Johnson, members of the board, you've had the opportunity to review the October personnel report. I call to your attention at the Committee of the Whole meeting under Transfers number 5. That item has been corrected. I hope you saw that upon your review. Are there any other questions?
Questions or comments for Dr. Lassane? Thank you. We have the minutes from September 6th Committee of the Whole meeting and September 12th Board of Education meeting. There are no additions or corrections to those minutes. I'll entertain a motion for the approval of consent agenda and the minutes from September.
So moved.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a comment, or want to add a comment to both Committee of the Whole minutes for September 6th and Board of Education meeting minutes for September 12th. Under the discussion of the North Iredell High School early college application in both minutes, I know several of the board members voiced concern about the safety of the high school students at North, and the security of the campus with the adult learners being admitted. So can we add one statement saying several board members voiced concern over the safety and security of the high school campus with the adult learners being admitted to the campus? Can we do that?
Just be amended.
Thank you.
Can you state that again, Ms. Haynes?
Just be amended minutes. Amended.
What I said was several board members voiced concerns regarding the safety and security of the high school students with the admission of the adult learners on the campus. That same statement can go on both minutes.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the consent agenda items plus the updated minutes version for both meetings.
We have a motion and a second by Ms. Haynes. Any further discussion regarding the motion? Not all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Next, we'll move on into our recognition portion of the night. We have the Community Schools Award. Ms. Weiberg.
Thank you, Dr. Cash. Well, it's become our custom every August. This community rallies around a huge push for school supplies for our students. So now, Matt, is it clear why you're here? This tradition has been built around large barrel delivery, pickup in a big yellow school bus on the very hottest day of the summer, and then the unveiling of the prize Stuff the Bus Award, and this has become much coveted. This year, Doosan Portable Power has walked off with top honors. The employees at Doosan, under the direction of Mrs. Nancy Wilson, have collected supplies for us for many years, but this year they really knocked it out of the park. About 20 organizations, including nonprofits, restaurants, hospitals, and manufacturing facilities, participated in School Tools Drive this year, providing thousands of pounds of much-needed supplies for our students. But this year, Doosan was the clear winner. It's going to be really hard news to deliver to the Rotary Club on Thursday. Our students benefit from the generosity of this community, and all of us appreciate the time and effort that the employees of Doosan put into this drive. And Matt Gordon is here tonight, and Matt is going to be accepting the coveted Stuff the Bus Award for Doosan. And Dr. Cash, I wonder if you would mind carrying that really expensive award. It's like a 3D certificate. Those guys they do a great job every year, but boy, I tell you, this year was something. And to those of us that had to unload that
Next, we have the Fit Friendly School Award from the American Heart Association. Ms. Ginger Edmiston.
Dr. Cash, I don't think she's here tonight, so let me just mention these awards, and we'll try to reschedule her for next month. The American Heart Association is one of our premier partnerships that we have with our community-based supporters. Ms. Edmiston has been working with us over the years and has done an exemplary job of working with all of our schools. The American Heart Association recognizes schools that go above and beyond with the focus on fit-friendly program in many of our schools, and we'll try to get her back in here next month to actually recognize those individual schools. She also does a program called Jump Rope for Hearts, and many of our elementary schools participate in that, and Ms. Edmiston would like to recognize some of the standouts in that program as well. So we'll get her back in here next month for you.
All right, thank you. Next, we have a recognition of Alice Absher, our president of the Retired School Personnel Association, who recently passed away. Ms. Absher has been very, very kind to our school board members and has always enjoyed bringing Christmas music to us from the choral group of retired people, and always really enjoyed poking fun at Brady Johnson, and actually enjoyed poking fun at the entire board, having had us sing solo parts in the Christmas carols last year. So I think, Brady, you were going to do a recognition.
Thank you, Dr. Cash. Members of the board, of course, we were all shocked at the passing of Alice Absher just a few days ago. Her funeral was conducted last week, as a matter of fact. Alice is no stranger to our school system. She was a career employee, lifelong employee of the Iredell-Statesville schools. In the research that I did, I found out that Alice graduated from Harmony High School in 1960. She attended John Wesley College and later went to Central Wesleyan University in South Carolina, where she obtained her Bachelor of Arts degree in early childhood education with a certification in exceptional children. She returned to Iredell County following her graduation in 1966 and began her teaching career at Cool Spring Elementary School. She then went on to Union Grove and ultimately wound up at her old high school, Harmony, where she spent the rest of her career teaching exceptional children there. Alice was a natural-born leader. When she was a teacher for the school system, for many years she was the president of NCAE. And upon her retirement, she quickly became involved in the Retired School Personnel Association and served as president of that organization as well. I also found out that Alice was very deeply involved in her community. She belonged to the V Point Ruatan Club. She was the national secretary for that organization. She was also the president of the Business and Professional Women's Club here in Statesville, along with the American Business Women. She was vice president of Delta Gamma Education Society here in Statesville, and I've already mentioned the fact that she had a long career with NCAE. Alice was very, very involved in the community. I learned recently that she and her husband, Arlie, actually sponsored a meal twice a year for the Harmony Volunteer Fire Department. And boy, when I went to the funeral last week, the fire department turned out too and said that they really enjoyed those meals twice a year. And I found out that Alice and her husband paid for that out of their own pocket, but it was just something that they did to give back to the community. Alice was instrumental in the 2014 bond referendum too. She rallied the retired school personnel. They worked polls for us. They put up yard signs and passed out magnets. And she wrote a glowing letter to the editor of the Statesville paper for us on the eve of the vote on that bond referendum. Ironically, November the 3rd, we are scheduled to have the retired school personnel visit Cool Springs Elementary School for their annual meeting. Unfortunately, she'll miss that meeting, but she was very, very excited to have them come in and tour the school and see the fruits of their labor. So we'll be looking forward to that. Alice's husband, Arlie, is also a member of the retired school personnel. He was a custodian that retired from the school system. And they had 3 children, Jeff, Regina, and Joey, and 1 granddaughter, Mary. She also leaves behind quite a few sisters and brothers. She came from a very large family there in the Harmony community, the church family there. I invited her husband to be here tonight, but Arlie is... it's hard for him to get out. He doesn't drive much by himself, so unfortunately he could not be with us tonight. Following her funeral last week, I pulled her personnel file to get some of this information to share with you tonight, and I ran across her original application that she filled out in 1965 as an aspiring teacher. And I was really taken aback by her philosophy that she had written as part of the application. Here's what she wrote in 1965. I feel that it is my responsibility as a teacher to see that each child in my classroom receives the guidance and the help to develop him or her into a good citizen. I want to develop activities for the individual child. I like to extend my activities so that every child in my classroom is involved. I feel that the child must learn from doing. And so many little things aren't taught in textbooks that children need to hear in their lives at an early age. So she certainly modeled that throughout her teaching career. At her funeral, her pastor said that Alice will be remembered as being small in stature, but she was large and in charge. And when she arrived on the scene, she generally took charge. As I reflect on her life, I am reminded of the passage from Galatians chapter 5, verse 22, which talks about the fruits of the Spirit. And these were certainly evident in Alice's life. Love, peace, joy, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance. And she will certainly be missed. We lost a tremendous advocate for public education with the passing of Alice. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our recognition portion for the evening tonight. We'll move now on into the non-consent agenda. We have the beginning teacher support plan. Mr. Todd, this is a voting item.
Good evening, Dr. Cash, members of the board, Mr. Johnson. I'm pleased to be here with you tonight to present the beginning teacher support plan as mandated by the state of North Carolina to have a plan in place to support all of our beginning teachers, numbering at this point 166 district-wide. You've had a chance to review this plan, and I'm up here to answer any questions.
Comments or questions regarding this plan? Again, we discussed this in detail last Monday at our Committee of the Whole meeting. Any points that you would like to bring to the public again tonight, Mr. Todd? Or?
Yes, we, as a result of this plan, we coordinate the multi-tiered approach of support for our beginning teachers in their first, second, and third year as they make their way to a continuing license. And I explained to new teachers on a good day this job is very challenging, and it's important to have in place a support structure that nurtures and grows effective teachers that form great relationships with our students. We're very proud of this plan. This plan has been honed over the years and improved. This is one of the things that is mandated by the State Board of Education that we're very proud of. And also during a recent audit of Title II funds in the past in our system, we've been recognized as this. One of the auditors said this is the gold standard of support for beginning teachers across the state.
Thank you. That was a point I hoped you would make, that we have a gold standard program, and I think we've heard comments back from our early in the career teachers over these first few years expressing appreciation for what we've done before the state mandated it. Yes. And I applaud you for your work to help provide this program for us and to lead the program. Any other comments or questions regarding this? If not, I'll entertain a motion that we approve the beginning teacher support program as written.
I make a motion that we accept staff's recommendation for it.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Mr. Kelly. Any discussion regarding the motion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries, then. Thank you. Next, we have another voting item, our 2015-16 audited financial statements. Ms. White.
Good evening. Tonight we have for your approval the 15-16 audited financial statements. We reviewed them last week at the Committee of the Whole meeting. Tonight, John Rosenthal, partner with Coffee Lovins and Company, the Statesville CPA firm that conducts our audit, is here to review the statements, and then we'll need a vote of approval. So, Mr. Rosenthal.
Good evening. I get the fun part, go over financial statements. I won't go over too many numbers. I will point some out to you. Does everyone have their copy of the audited statements? Fantastic. I do want to always tell boards, out of this 70-page document, we're responsible for a lot more than 9 pages, but we've got 4 reports in here, and I do want to go over those. Page 1 is our auditor's report on the financial statements themselves. Basically, you have a clean opinion, an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. Basically, on page 2, it says, in our opinion, the statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. And that's a good report. There's no issues at hand. There's some other schedules, and I'll go into the detail there. There's the management's discussion and allowance, 2 pension schedules that we do not audit, and then pretty much everything else we've audited in one way or the other. If you're bored and want to try to understand the statements, I would recommend pages 4 to 11. Management's discussion and analysis gives you an overview of what happened during the year and the financial status of the school board itself. I do want to point out on page 12, 15 years ago or so, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board changed the way accounting for governments was presented, and that's showing on page 12 and 13. Page 12 is what I will call the balance sheet of the school board. And it's probably different from anything else you see during the year because it presents the capital assets, and if you look about a third of the way down on the page, of $99 million. It also shows long-term liabilities and liabilities, the biggest of which would be the pension liability, and those numbers are about 2/3 of the way down. I want to point out, I compared these numbers to last year's numbers, and if you look at the bottom right number, $74 million, your total net position for the entire school board increased $6 million over last year. And I'm pointing that out, not that we're trying to make money or whatever, but considering where the school board and most school boards have been in the state, that's a good turnaround right there. It's an improvement. Page 14 is the balance sheet for the governmental funds, and its focus is on cash and those assets that can be converted to cash quickly. And I want to point out another number. In the general fund, the left-hand column, it has total fund balances of $6.6 million. That amount is a $1 million increase over the prior year. Again, a positive turnaround from where you had been. And then you can see that again on page 15, and I want to point out this is your P&L statement for the governmental funds, and this is probably more of what you're used to seeing. And it just shows how the services that you provide, such as instructional services, system-wide support services, debt payments, how they are spent and how they're funded on a short-term basis. A couple of the numbers I want to point out. Under the general fund, Iredell County, you got $33,700,000, and that's a $1.3 million increase over the prior year, or roughly 4%. Now, the big number in the second column, the state public schools, of $107,500,000. I went back to the June of 14. You've had a $5 million increase of state funding. Now, of course, you probably had a very significant decrease preceding those years, but that's a significant increase to help you fund the schools. On the bottom of the page, under the general fund column, you'll see about the third number from the bottom, the $1 million increase. I went back over 3 years, and why I'm pointing this out to you, it's important. Prior 3 years, June of 13, June of 14, June of 15, you had a $6 million decrease in fund balance. And I'm just pointing out this is a positive turn that we've got an increase going on. Page 20 are your proprietary funds, your child nutrition, and your child care. And these are the funds that you charge a fee. So they're presented on the accrual basis, similar to small businesses would be. Page 21, and at the bottom of the page, you'll see the change in net position for the child nutrition was an increase of $400,000. Prior year was a decrease of $370,000. Again, a positive turn. The child care, while that number is small, an increase of $11,000. In the prior year, you had a decrease of $35,000. So all those numbers, and I'm pointing out the good numbers here for you. I'm not going to go over the notes or any more number detail unless you really want to, or if you've got questions. I'll be glad to try to answer them. I will go over our reports starting on page 56. As part of the audit, the Yellow Book audit, we're required to consider the internal control over financial reporting, more to determine our audit procedures rather than report on internal control itself. Through that process, and on the top of page 57, we're indicating we did not identify any deficiencies that are material weaknesses. And then we do the disclaimer saying there could be material weaknesses that we just didn't see. And then we test compliance also over matters that could affect the financial statements. Did you adopt your budget in time? Are your cash accounts or investments in authorized investments? Did you overspend your budget anywhere? And the results of that test, those tests disclose no instances of noncompliance. Now, as part of receiving federal money and state money, you're required to have what we call a single audit. So we're required to test compliance on major programs. Those programs, the major programs, federal on the top of page 63 and the state are at the bottom of 63. And basically we test compliance and we consider the internal controls over compliance. Top of page 59, our opinion on the major federal programs indicates that the board complied in all material respects with the compliance requirements that could have a direct material effect on each major federal program. And then down at the bottom, we're just indicating we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control over compliance that we consider to be material weaknesses. And the same goes for the state programs, that from our testing, you complied with those compliance requirements and we did not identify any material weaknesses. We also issued, as part of our audit, we're required to communicate to you, those charged with governance. And that's a 3-page letter. If you've got it there, I just want to go over some of the highlights, if you will, or what I've highlighted. Under significant audit findings, it refers to the accounting policies used by the board, and those are included in note 1 of these statements. Down at the bottom, we're required to communicate to you significant estimates that are used in arriving at these numbers. And the estimates that we determine are significant would be depreciable assets. How long are they going to last? How much depreciation to take on them each year? Also, your estimate that's provided to you by the pension plan and its actuary is determining the pension liability and the expense and the funding. And we look at all those estimates, look at them in last year, are they consistent and do they make sense? And they all look reasonable. And when we went through that process. Page 2, these are all required disclosures, and fortunately they're all good. We encounter no difficulties in performing the audit. And the next one, the corrected and uncorrected misstatements, doesn't say it here, but it's an indication of the strength of your finance and accounting department. There were no audit adjustments when we went through the audit process to arrive at these statements. We had no disagreements with management as we went through the audit. We are unaware of any consultations with other accountants. An example, did they go out and opinion shop to find the right opinion? And then we did communicate a couple of other items for opportunity to strengthen internal control. And then at the bottom is just saying we did not audit the management's discussion and analysis and the 2 pension schedules. Any questions through that whirlwind of financial information?
Questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to thank Ms. White and her staff for all they do. They do a marvelous job of keeping up with our money, and I just want to thank them. I also want to thank our administration. Obviously, this year's, when I went through this and spent a couple hours on it, when you see that your general fund increased by $1.2 million, our overall net position increased by over $6 million, and our debt decreased by over $2 million. Mr. Johnson, you had a good year financially last year, so thank you. Staff did a lot of work
Thank you, Mr. Page, and I too would like to echo that by saying we're very proud of our finance department. They do an excellent job. Melissa cautions me every year when I say this, but I think now this is 10 or 11 years with 0 audit findings, and that's just very impressive work. They do take their job very, very seriously. I've also got to give a shout out to our principals, our bookkeepers, our department heads, all of the folks that manage budgets. I would say in our school district that short of student and staff safety and well-being, the financial, the fiduciary capacity that we have and the responsibility we have to our taxpayers is a top priority in our district. And so I'm very pleased to hear this report, and I hope it sends a clear signal to our community that we are good stewards of the taxpayers' money.
Thank you. Again, this is a voting item. We'll entertain a motion that we approve our audit report for the year.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Again, thank you all. Next, we have a school improvement plans first reading. Dr. Taylor.
Dr. Cash, Mr. Johnson, members of the board. Last week we brought to you information regarding school improvement plans. Those are posted online. They will be available for public review as well as your review until the November board meeting. There are a couple of school improvement plans that are not posted yet. They are required to use the state template, and they have to be trained on that prior to being able to input their plans into that. The schools that are using the NC STAR plan are Monticello and Presley, Statesville Middle, West Middle, East Middle, Troutman Middle, Statesville High School, North High School, and South High School, Cloverleaf, NB Mills, East Elementary, and Troutman Elementary. Those plans will be posted online for review by October the 21st, and they will be, we will be asking for a vote at the November board meeting. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have, or if you've got any feedback on any of those plans, we'll be glad to share that with those schools.
Comments or questions for Dr. Taylor? Thank you. Next, we have item D, the low-performing school legislation. We've got Mr. Johnson, Dr. Taylor, and Dr. Lassane all to present that.
Yes, Dr. Cash, members of the board, last Monday at your CAL meeting, we did take a two-pronged approach to making sure that the board is up to speed on the legislation regarding low-performing schools. So Dr. Lassane is going to do a brief summary of the actual legislation and the statutory requirements for all districts in North Carolina. And then Dr. Taylor will give you a snapshot, just to refresh you from last week, about the support plans that we have for each of our core schools.
Dr. Cash, Mr. Johnson, members of the board. I'm not going to go into as much detail as we did at the committee of the whole meeting, but I do want to point out some key pieces of information that were shared last week. And I'll probably start right there with the summary of North Carolina identified schools. And so with that summary, we talked last week, and remember I gave you a slightly different slide that talked about the difference in the percentages. And what you see if you look at charter schools as well as traditional schools, you're seeing actually a larger percentage of charter schools that were identified this for the 2015-16 school year as being low performing than our traditional schools. And I do think that's important because if you look at this and you look across and you see the 458 and you see the 31, you don't have the comparison of what does that look like for the number of those schools that are in the state of North Carolina. So you can also see that there were a number of schools that came off of the list as being identified as low-performing schools, and then a few that came back on. But our net loss was much greater than our net gain, which is positive as far as the work that is being done across the state. If we could scroll up. We talked about last week also our 5 schools that are identified, which are less than the number of identified schools we had last year. And we talked about that in the context of the other schools that we have identified that need additional support. For the purposes of the record, remember that our definition of low-performing schools are those schools that receive a performance grade of a D or an F, but those can also be schools that met or did not meet expected growth. So in the case of one of our identified schools this year, that school exceeded growth last year, met growth this year, but that threw them into the category of being identified as a low-performing school. We can continue to scroll. We talked about the support that we will provide as a district to these schools. We talked about the plans as well as the accelerated pieces that these schools will receive, regardless to whether it's personnel or additional items to help make sure that the needs are being addressed. A couple of main things that I would like to point out for the record is with the identification, and we call them internally core schools. With the identification of being a core school, there's a recommendation that must come before the superintendent to the board, and then our Board of Education to the State Board of Education. And so for the principals in any of those identified schools, you can see that one of 4 actions must take place. That recommendation can be either to retain that principal with no remediation plan, but in order for that to happen, they must have been at that school less than 2 years, or if they've been there greater than 2 years, they must both meet growth and have a higher performance composite than was at the school the year before. You can retain the principal with a remediation plan. That's a slight change from the legislation last year. You can also transfer the principal to a non-low performing school in the district, but that is only permitted if a letter is sent to all the parents in that school, if they have had previous success at a school of that same classification. That means they had to have been a principal at an elementary school going to a low-performing elementary school. They also would have to be on a remediation plan for a year, and they could not be transferred to another low-performing school. Keep in mind that with this provision, often the principals that are serving at our identified schools, that may be their first principalship. So if it's their first principalship, these individuals would not have that as an option. The final option is to dismiss or demote the principal. We can scroll, continue. We can continue. In addition to that, there are also requirements for evaluation of licensed employees. Similar to what I just outlined regarding the principals, keep in mind that for teachers, if any teacher in an identified school receives a rating below proficient on any standard, they must be put on a mandatory improvement plan, and that is outlined in legislation. They could be subjected to immediate dismissal for inappropriate conduct or something that causes substantial harm. Dismissal, demotion, or non-renewal, that would generally come at the end of that school year. No recommendation, which must come with an explanation from the superintendent, or they could be retained on an improvement plan and a cycle, which also means that they would have to be moved to the fullest cycle of evaluation. So I wanted to hit those points because those are items that we really have to discuss with these schools, and we really want to make sure that we are wrapping our arms of support around them. You can stop right at that slide right there. And that we're not, because a lot of these actions can be very demoralizing for these schools, and we have to be aware of that. We have great work going on within our identified schools, and the individuals work very hard. So I just wanted to point out to you the timeline. The clock, as we discussed last week, starts on October 6th. And so all of these provisions, as outlined in legislation, will have to be followed according to that, and that's just my summary.
We also discussed in quite a bit of detail the additional coaching and support that was being provided to these schools. I'm not going to go over the exhaustive list, but several of those things included strategic staffing and some flexibility in how they use positions, classified positions, or teaching positions within those schools. Additional resources and materials that have been requested by the school leadership team. We also provided them with some preferred slots into professional development and trainings. Statesville Middle School in particular, their entire school was trained on capturing kids' hearts, as well as about 20 of the staff members from Statesville High School, and that was per request at those sites. We've also, at our secondary schools, provided some content-specific coaching from our internal staff, as well as Troutman Middle and Statesville Middle are also receiving some content-specific coaching from some of the state-provided staff as well, as is NB Mills and Cloverleaf, in some specific coaching for their staff on literacy specialists. We meet with those schools and their leadership teams on a regular basis just to kind of touch base with them to see what is working well and what additional supports they may need that we can provide for them. So we're meeting with them about once every other month. We also have differentiated the principal meetings, some to help provide more structured support for those schools as they need.
Last thing I'd like to say about this is I do think that the General Assembly is going to take a fresh look at this law when they reconvene in January. I think that's true, partly because there's a lot of people beginning to take notice now about these letter grades, and particularly the sanctions that are being imposed on the teachers and the principals. So parents are asking the right questions, and one of those questions is it really fair to grade a school on one test and one day? How many of us would like to have your annual evaluation be based on one data point, on one day throughout the entire calendar year? There's multiple measures of what goes into making a great school. And so I think the General Assembly is probably going to start exploring that and asking for some input from educators and parents into helping to refine this law and make it better. Again, as Dr. Lassane and Dr. Taylor pointed out, our approach in Iredell-Statesville schools is to embrace our schools and to support our teachers and our principals. And so we do feel like that we have good measures put in place to do that, and we want to do everything that we possibly can to keep their morale high and to help them be effective in those classrooms on a daily basis. And I hope that you see the support plans that we do have in place are geared towards doing that. we're not about punishing or demoralizing our staff members. When we survey our parents, 92% of our parents give their school a letter grade of A or B. And the reason that that's true is because the parents are taking a holistic view of what's going on in that school every single day, not just one day. But I hope this has helped you get your mind wrapped around the A through F report card.
Thank you.
Could I ask, I know the outlines for what we're going to do in each of the schools is back here, but I would assume that when I look through the school improvement plans, especially of those schools that are listed in the core group, some of those outlines would be there outlined as the school improvement plan?
All of these schools are required to use the state NC STAR template, and the state has identified 12 indicators of successful schools that they are required to address in their school improvement plans. So their plans are going to look very different than the plans that you have seen before, and they will be addressing those 12 indicators identified by the state that they're required to do.
And in that, it'll be covering the things that we think we're going to be doing
Yes.
to help them get up on a better level, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions regarding the low-performing school legislation?
People didn't know, though, that they go to these schools, they're not marked. You walk up to one that's got a D on the outside of the building or whatever. If I blindfolded people, I've been to every one of these schools, and I blindfolded you, put you inside, you wouldn't know which school you were in, because our staff and these principals and students are exemplary to us especially. So just because they gave them some silly grade in Raleigh, they don't really, probably never been to our schools and seen what we've done. Our schools are great, and these schools here that are 5 that are earmarked, we're going to be fine too. And the people there, I support them 100%.
We'll move on then to the proposed policies for second readings. These all require a vote. I would suggest that as we present these, we've got them in blocks of, in 3 blocks, different numbers, but Dr. Taylor has some, Dr. Lassane has some, and Dr. Miller has some. I would suggest that we vote based on those presentations. Nobody has objections, and we'll hear those. So, Dr. Taylor, if you'll present yours.
Yes, I have 2 policies for you tonight. The first one is Policy 3410, addresses testing and assessment program. This just puts a requirement in there that the superintendent shall provide for the online administration of state-required tests to the extent required by the state board. We are already meeting all of the requirements that are for online testing, and we will continue to move forward with other pieces as they are required, but we have met that requirement for that policy. The other policy is 3420, which is student promotion and accountability. We did discuss this in quite a bit of detail last month at the Committee of the Whole meeting, and we gathered some input. Section H on page 3 is the most significant changes there. Part 1, repeating a previously failed course, that is a requirement. We are required to put that piece in. But the optional piece that we discussed, and we did talk get some feedback from principals, teachers, and counselors as well, was the repeating a course for credit, which was earned. So it's basically grade replacement. And what this states is that if a student made a C or lower in a class, and they meet all of those requirements on page 4, they may have the opportunity to retake that class and earn a better grade. In order to do that, they would have to make a written request to repeat the course. The principal or their designee would have to approve that request. There has to be available space, so all of the students who are the first-time students taking the course would have to have the opportunity first. It must be a duplicate, so for example, they couldn't take an honors course the first time and an academic course the second time. And then upon the completion, the new grade would replace the credit. They only get one time. I think this probably would be utilized very, very infrequently by students, but for students who maybe have a significant life event during one semester that impairs their ability to come to school and to take the classes and do well, this gives them an opportunity to kind of have a redo for that. So that was the major significant change, but we'd be glad to answer any questions you have about those policies.
Questions or comments about two policies? Testing and assessment and student promotion and accountability. If not, I entertain a motion that we approve those as read.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Dr. Lassane, I'll ask you to present the items on 3 through 12.
Thank you. Dr. Cash, Mr. Johnson, members of the board, we have quite a number of HR-related policies. So I'll go through and try to give you an overview, but please note that if there are any questions, I'm glad to answer them to the degree that I can. First of all, coming from as recommendation from the School Boards Association, all of these policies is 7100, recruitment and selection of personnel. You can see that there's a general statement that connects this policy to the board's objective of providing a sound basic education. And you will also see beside in the memo what's optional, what's strongly recommended, and what's required on each of these policies. 7100 revisions also provide specific provisions regarding nepotism. And so that is a significant change with the additions that are required to this policy that we discussed last month. It also updates legal references and cross-references for connecting the policy to others. The second policy is discrimination, harassment, and bullying complaint. There are lots of just structural moves within this policy that are optional. In addition, there's a recommended change related to how we share information with a complainant regarding any action that may be taken against a perpetrator. The next policy is prohibition against retaliation, and you will see in looking at this policy that there are significant changes that have been made to that. It revises the board's expectation for employees to report certain types of unethical actions such as financial improprieties, ethical violations, and other illegal practices. And it also clarifies their protections that exist under the whistleblower clause. In addition to that, it also adds a process for filing those complaints with the superintendent or the Board of Education, and it also adds some legal language to this policy. The next policy for revision is the public records policy, which has a simple update to the title as well as hyperlinks that would be found within this policy. 7405, extracurricular and non-instructional duties. You will note we had some discussion about this last month. This takes out the clause that protects teachers with 27 or more years experience from extracurricular duties. As times have changed, that is now stricken from the required part of this policy. It also changes the terminology from exempt teachers to initially licensed teachers and makes some footnote changes also. The next policy has to do with electronically stored information retention. These are required changes as far as the citations and legal references, as well as updating some titles and hyperlinks. I would add, again, to remind you of what we talked about last month, this is an ongoing discussion that we have to look at as a district. And David Blattner and I are actually working on some pieces to make sure that we are definitely in line as an organization as far as the retention of things like emails and other electronically stored information. Policy 7635 is the return to work policy. And the changes to this policy simply clarify our obligation to assist and accommodate employees in finding suitable employment that is readily available within the school system. It also clarifies that we are not required to create a position in order to meet those accommodations. It corrects and updates information in the footnotes for information purposes. Policy 7810, the evaluation of licensed employees. It strongly recommended that a statement be added specifically referencing access to EVAS data by teachers as required by state law. It is also recommended that we add requirements regarding the licensed personnel in those identified schools, low-performing schools that we were talking about earlier, to address the new State Board of Education policies, as well as to update footnotes and legal references. You will see even a change in title to the next policy, 7920. The recommendation is to change that title to Reduction in Force for Teachers and School Administrators, as well as it limits the application of the policies to employees with the right to the statutory RIF procedures, and also tracks some new state requirements and updates legal references and footnotes. And the final policy for second reading is 7950, which is the non-career status teachers non-renewal, and that's just an update to the title, as well as to some cross references. Are there any questions regarding any of these proposed changes to policy?
I have a question, or for Dr. Lassane. 7100, the recruitment and selection of personnel. Before I was on the board back in May of 2014. This was revised. Is the new policy you're presenting, is this going to remove the requirement of the board to be notified if a candidate for employment has a record of criminal conviction? Will that be handled via the district administration now?
That would be determined by the Board of Education.
Clarify.
Right. So you can make, in other words, the board would make a decision whether you want to remain. There's no requirement from the School Boards Association regarding that. So that would be something that you would determine as the Board of Education in making whatever recommendation to this policy, whether you want that to remain or not.
Was that in their, that in the policy that was trickled down to you guys from the State Board Association?
I think what you're referencing is there was a recommendation that came forward from back in, and I guess it was, that seems like a long time ago, May 2014, yeah. But it may have been that long ago, and there was a recommendation at that time that would have released the board from doing all of that review, but at that time this Board of Education said that they wanted to maintain that. And so this board would still have, obviously, the option to say, we do want you to bring that or you don't. Regardless to what the board would decide to do regarding a policy, anytime the superintendent makes a recommendation of a candidate that would have a background, I am required to report that to the State Board of Education.
The State Board, okay. Mm-hmm. So as it's written now, mm-hmm. It stops at the superintendent unless he or she wants to trickle it to the board.
The superintendent makes that recommendation, and we have, per your policy, the requirement to notify the board.
On the new?
On the new, it should be that way. Did I miss that? 1 second.
Because I think we've discussed this in the past, and I mean, since I've been on the board, mm-hmm. strike that and allow the district administration to make that call.
From my recall, Ms. Haynes, there's been lots of discussion about that, but nothing that has come forward that would change policy.
Right. I know, just...
Yeah. But if that's a desire, we can do that. And I can't... I would have to go back and find exactly where that is. Give me a second.
I'd just like to say that we realize as board members that many times as you're out in the community engaging parents and citizens and whatnot, if we have hired an employee that does have a background, an item on a background check, we would really like for you guys to know that ahead of time so that you're not surprised or taken off guard if somebody were to ask about one of our employees. Many times these are very simple infractions. It may even be driving records or bad checks or something of that nature, but as a courtesy to the board, we always like to bring those to you in closed session just so that you know about that and that you don't get caught off guard. And I would say that we want to continue that practice, not to ask you to make a decision or anything like that, but just, again, for information purposes.
I guess, and I appreciate that, but in doing so, sometimes if you do that, the board, it is seen as the board had the final say-so, whereas the district administration, I feel, could make that determination without us.
Right, absolutely. But again, just as to strengthen the partnership between the administration and the Board of Education, we like full disclosure, and it is our recommendation to you. When we bring you folks on the personnel list, we are bringing those to you, saying we recommend this person for hire, and we would like to continue to, in closed session, if there is a background item, bring it to your attention.
And I would add a piece to that also is if I have to make that report to the State Board of Education, I would fully, in the interest of full transparency, want to make sure that the board is aware that said report is being made. And just for that, we do not, say for instance, if a candidate has a background and we are not recommending them for employment, we don't bring that to you. It's only the individuals who are being recommended for employment. So that's still the superintendent's recommendation that requires the board approval. And just making sure that you have all of that information, that if their name was just on a list, you would have no idea what you were really approving and what would be going to the State Board of Education.
A vote on this 7100 does not change that. Is that what?
It does not. It would not.
Any other comments or questions about these policies? Not, I'll entertain a motion that we approve the policies listed from items number 3 through 12 in our second readings proposal.
Motion to accept staff's recommendations for those.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have Dr. Miller for the final numbers 13 through 18.
I'm going to try to make this quick. Primarily, policy 9030 is the one that has the most significant changes, and it is a policy which is in effect at this time. And what it does is it establishes a threshold for change orders on our construction projects. We bring those to you already, but this establishes a $90,000 threshold, which meets our 6420 policy for superintendent approval without board approval. However, any change orders which come about do come to the board. What this does, it gives flexibility to Mr. Jackson so that when we do have a major or a significant change order, he can approve those. That's the primary change in that particular policy. Be glad to answer questions for that particular policy, 9030. The other policies, all of the remaining policies, are minor changes related to the Iranian Divestment Act, which is General Statute 147 6E. And it is basically just creating that footnote and verbiage within the policy which says that if there are any subcontractors which do not meet the Iranian Divestment Act list or are on that list, we can't do business with them. The rest of the policy remains as is. Be glad to answer questions on any of those.
Comments or questions regarding these policies? I'll entertain a motion that we approve the policies listed on items 13 through 18.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Kelly, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
The motion carries. Thank you. Now we come time for Roman numeral 6 for public comment. We did not have anyone sign to speak outside this evening before the meeting. I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to make a comment to the board. If not, I'll ask if any board members would like to make comments.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to remind everybody that where we were at a year ago with the disastrous truck hitting the owning the North Iredell, which greatly affected the South Iredell band. Personally, my short 2 years on the board, that was the hardest day I've ever dealt with anything in school in my 38 years of being there. And we were very lucky and thankful, but sometimes it takes something bad to bring something good out. And I saw the communities, the entire county, the entire state, all over the nation, that got behind and supported our young people. And it was so heartwarming to see how much people cared for our children all over everywhere. And I just hope and pray we never have to deal with anything like that again. And it seems like it was just yesterday, but it seems like it was a long way to go. But I hope we all remember that. Thank you.
Other board member comments? No, we'll move on to superintendent comments. Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Cash, members of the board. Got a couple slides here I'd like to share with you. That distinguished-looking group of young people is one of the classes at the Career and Technical School in Culinary Arts. And that group of students was instrumental in feeding us at the District 7 School Board meeting that was held September 22nd there at the Career Academy. And I've got to say thank you to Mr. Page for recommending that site location for us. Here is a card from Ed Dunlap, and I'll send it down the road for you. He sent that to us last week, and then ironically, I was in a meeting today with Dr. Dunlap down in Raleigh, and he again brought up this meeting and the facility there at Katz and the hospitality that the board members from across our region received that night. We had about 75 board members there from 11 different school systems across our region. And one of the highlights of the evening was one of the breakout sessions. Our Schools First conducted one of the breakout sessions, and they had good attendance at that session. And it's my understanding that they have now been invited to do their presentation in some neighboring school systems. And they are also going to be doing a presentation at your state convention in November. So kudos to that group of hardworking parents that were part of the night down there. All right. The Foothills Invitational was held October the 1st at North Iredell High School. And as Mr. Page mentioned, this was the event last year where the tragic accident took place. It was really good to see this event continue on. The band there at North Iredell High School, I think this is the 4th year of that event. You know it's going to be a good event when you get to North Iredell and you can't find a parking space. But I had to park way out in the boonies, and when I got there, both sides of the stadium were just absolutely packed. I haven't heard, but I I've heard rumors that the gate that day for the band boosters was phenomenal, and that's wonderful. We had 4 of our 5 high schools present that day. Of course, North hosted the event. Statesville was there, South Iredell there, and West Iredell was there, and they all did excellent. We had some very, very proud parents there that day as well. The Whiteout Day is something that South Iredell High School did on October 3rd, the anniversary of that accident that Mr. Page talked about. And I'd just like to echo what Mr. Page said about a tragedy bringing out the best of people. And what we have witnessed from the day of that accident through today is just absolutely phenomenal. It is heartwarming to see the amount of involvement and the care and the love that has been shared throughout our schools, particularly North and South. I really have to commend all of the kids and the teachers, the parents who rallied around these students, and even to this day continue to pour out support. But the Whiteout at South Iredell was a phenomenal event this year. That's a very ominous-looking group of folks there. We did have our signing of the proposed plan to open an early college at North Iredell High School next August. And so you can see there a very distinguished group of Mitchell officials, along with the vice chairman of the county commissioners. Marvin Norman was there, several school board members. The initial feedback that we've gotten on our application is it's an impressive application. And so we are expecting great things as we get our feedback later on in the spring. As a matter of fact, we are moving ahead in a positive intent, assuming that our application is going to be approved. We do have an information night set for October the 27th at 6 o'clock in the Media Center at North Iredell Middle School. And if you're free that night, we would love to have you there as we start our first information session for the parents in the northern end of the community. We've received quite a bit of positive response from the parents in that end of the county, and I think that we'll have some good attendance there that night. I really don't think we'll have any trouble finding plenty of kids to apply to this new school, and we're very excited about this project. October is anti-bullying month, and I tell you, if you don't believe that bullying is a serious thing, then you just talk to any parent today that has an adolescent, particularly online bullying. And we are very fortunate here in our school system. We have a young lady, she is a senior at Statesville High School, Jennifer McLean, who was a victim of bullying many, many years ago in middle school, who began this summit her freshman year there at Statesville High School. It has grown each year. And we do bring a team of students along with their counselor from each of our middle schools and high schools to the summit each fall. And we challenge these kids to go back to their school and start an anti-bullying initiative at their school. Something that I've learned by attending this summit each year is that statistically 92% of bullying incidents stop if there is a third-party intervention. And so our kids know that, and many of our kids now are becoming very, very bold and stepping in the gap and stopping some of these incidents of bullying across our district. This year's summit is scheduled for October the 20th at Statesville High School, and this year, October 27th, we will be having our first elementary Ignite Summit, and we'll be bringing in 4th graders and 5th graders with this same idea of educating them and sending them back into their schools to initiate a program in each of our elementary schools.
27, same day at North Iredell thing too.
Yes, sir.
Same. Both days.
We have formed a partnership with UNC Charlotte. They will be bringing a school master's certification program here to our school system. We have our first information session set up for that on October the 26th at 4 o'clock at the Unity Center. Gardner-Webb University is closing their campus here in Statesville, so we reached out to UNC Charlotte to see if they would help fill that gap and continue that pipeline of administrators for us. So we're very excited about this partnership, and we hope that we'll have a good attendance that night and get enough of our folks and people from neighboring counties that we can form a cohort here in Iredell County. It certainly would be convenient to have all of those classes offered right here in Statesville and cut off that drive to Charlotte. We've also talked to them about giving us a price break on some of their courses, so they have agreed to do that as well. Tomorrow is a big day in our county. We will be holding our groundbreaking ceremonies at North Iredell High School at 9 o'clock and South Iredell High School at 1 o'clock. The Visual and Performing Arts buildings we'll be talking about, and we certainly want to make sure that we do a good job of thanking our community for the approval of those bond funds. These projects have been a long time coming, and the schools are very, very excited about the additional classroom space and the space for the visual and performing arts at each of these high schools. So I hope that you can be in attendance tomorrow. Marvin Norman is going to be representing the county commissioners and has agreed to attend. And I think we've also got Mr. Fraley and Mr. Curtis from the House and the Senate that will be in attendance. So we're looking forward to breaking ground on these two projects. Here is another big event coming up for us, and we strategically planned this for the World Series. I hope it coincides with the World Series that week. But a lot of folks don't know this, but there are 2 school systems in North Carolina that do not offer softball and baseball in middle school. And we're one of those 2 school systems. And so we're going to try to do something about that. We are signing a memorandum of understanding with the Babe Ruth folks and our local Parks and Recreation Department. They have been extremely helpful and supportive of our plan to bring these new sports to our school system next school year. So again, this event is scheduled for Statesville High School at 10 o'clock on October 27th. And we'll have kids and principals, athletic directors from all of our middle schools there that day to celebrate this big event. As you know, Scotts Elementary School was accepted as an A-plus school at the state level this year. And that is a big initiative for Scotts Elementary School and the first A-plus arts integration program for the Iredell-Statesville schools. So we are very, very excited for them. We're very pleased with Leanne Hall, the principal there at Scotts, and the leadership that she has provided. This program this year has received about $70,000 in grants to support this work. And that's not bad. So join us October the 27th at 5 o'clock there in the gymnasium at Scotts. The kids have some delightful acts in store for us that night. And they have been practicing very, very hard on this and are looking forward to rolling out their arts integration program at Scotts Elementary. Recognize that lady on the right? That's Alice, and that was a Christmas singing here at the Board of Education one year. I don't know what year that was. It wasn't last year, though, because I'll never forget the singing of the 12 Days of Christmas.
Some things you need to forget.
Yeah. The retired school personnel will be having their annual luncheon November the 3rd at Scotts Elementary School. They had requested, Alice had requested, that we host that event at Cool Springs so that the retired folks could see the new school that they worked so hard to help promote. And so we hope that you can join us that day too. There will be a work session for them at 10 o'clock, and they have some speakers coming in. But lunch will be served at 11:30. And Judy Hicks, the principal there at Cool Spring, is really looking forward to having us on campus that day. So please join us if you can. This year, 2016-17, at our district level, we do monitor our performance. We monitor where we're being successful, any gaps that we have. And as a leadership team, we have identified 9 areas that we want to focus on this year. And so these are our district PDSAs for the school year. You're very familiar with MTSS and the behavior side of that triangle as well as the academic side of that triangle. Some of our schools are absolutely doing a wonderful job with that and getting great results for their kids. We are adding a component to that today, closing the gap. We do have some schools that are being challenged with the reopening of the gap between our majority and minority students. So Kelly Marcy and Mrs. Sells are focusing on that. There is a team of folks that work with them. These are just the district champions for that PDSA. And so we have principals, assistant principals, teachers. Anybody can join one of these committees and work on that work. And we'll be bringing these groups before you throughout the school year so that you can hear about the work that they're doing. Our impact work continues. Phil Harden is leading that for us. Of course, this was our grant that we secured several years ago to roll out our one-to-one initiative and our blended learning work that is taking place in all of our middle and high schools. CTE expansion, that's Career and Technical Education expansion and alignment, is being led by Todd Williams. And I tell everybody that CTE is the rising star in North Carolina. People are figuring out that, you know, one of the things they're hoping that children walk away from high school with is credentials, job skills, so that they can enter the workplace if they so choose. And so Mr. Williams and his team are looking at exploring additional courses that we can offer in our school system, aligning those courses to the expectation of the community, and making sure that we are providing the workforce that Iredell County needs. The Innovation Center is a new idea that is being rolled out down at the Career Academy. This is an idea of just creating a place where kids can go and be innovative and creative, and where kids can use technology and learn how to develop apps and gaming and just let their imaginations get the best of them. So look for more information about our Innovation Center soon. Sherrod Martin is leading that effort for us. And again, she has assembled a team from a cross-section of our community. We continue to focus on our graduation rate and our dropout rate. Kelly Cooper is leading that initiative for us. We have a goal of getting our graduation rate to over 90%. And that's something that we take very, very seriously. So we want to make sure that we're doing a good job of focusing on that. You know, our early colleges have far exceeded that expectation. The Collaborative College has a 100% graduation rate, and Crossroads has a 97% graduation rate. So we know it can be done, and we want to make sure that all of our schools are meeting those expectations. The next PDSA comes from the Advanced Ed study that we did last spring. We were challenged to create a process so that every child in our district has an adult advocate. And so Dr. Lassane and Mr. Armstrong are leading that effort for us. And we look forward to seeing what becomes of this PDSA and making sure that we can stand up and boldly declare that all 20,000 of our kids does have an adult looking after them and shepherding them through their educational process. Another recommendation from Advanced Ed was a scoring rubric. You know, right now, across our district, we have a very, very loose process for the way teachers determine grades. And so Advanced Ed encouraged us to sit down and look holistically across our district and see if we can come up with some plans so that there is some continuity to how teachers assign grades, so that a grade at Lake Norman High School can equate to a grade for the same course at North Iredell High School. Dr. Taylor and her team is leading that effort for us. Strategic planning, we've received a lot of accolades about our strategic plan and the way that it is data-driven and has SMART goals. But one of the pieces of feedback that we got from Advanced Ed last year is how deeply immersed in the community is our strategic plan. Is that plan developed by the educators without a lot of input from the public? And so Mr. Stuss has pulled together a team, and we're going to reassess the way that we develop and roll out our strategic plan on an annual basis. And then Ms. Weiberg is leading our last district PDSA for us. She and her team on imaging and communication. We realize that we live in a very, very competitive market now. And so we have to be very purposeful about how our schools are viewed, how our schools market to their customers, the parents and the students, and how we communicate, not only with our parents, but the larger community. So with that in mind, we've got a little snippet of a video we'd like to show you. Oops, I'm sorry, I got one more. December the 8th is our legislative breakfast, and that's tentative. We have put out some feelers, and what we would like to do on December the 8th is to assemble our members of the General Assembly, along with you, the Board of Education, as well as our county commissioners, and just talk about what would be our priorities when the General Assembly comes back to town in January. So that's scheduled for December the 8th at the Unity Center at 7:30. Now, here's our video. I haven't seen this yet, so this is a surprise to me. I bet it'll be good, though, Susie.
Iredell-Statesville schools take pride in offering choice options to the residents of Iredell County. With early college opportunities, virtual learning, international baccalaureate schools, STEM curriculum, career and technical education, and other choice options geared at finding the perfect fit for your child. Each of our strong neighborhood schools offers a range of quality academics and extracurricular opportunities that develop student talent and build confidence. Visit us online to learn more.
Yeah. Good job. That's very nice. Very professional. So that's just a real quick snapshot of some of the things that are going on and some of the things that we have planned in the days ahead in the district. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our agenda for the meeting tonight. We know we had a closed session early beforehand. Do we have reason to go back into closed session? That was it?
No, sir. We're finished.
Okay. All right. Well, just before we adjourn, just mention some upcoming dates that you can read with me on the board. Mr. Johnson already mentioned tomorrow's groundbreaking ceremonies at North Iredell and South Iredell High Schools. October 19th will be our next early release professional development day. November 7th, next committee of the whole meeting at the ADR Education Center at 6 p.m. And then November 14th will be our next Board of Education meeting here at the Iredell County Government Center at 6 p.m. That being said, we'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion, we adjourn?
One second.
Nope, you got something else?
I'll second, but let's have a discussion. I'll second your motion to adjourn, but need to have a quick discussion.
Okay.
This Thursday, October 13th, the commissioners are having a forum if anybody wants to go. Civic Center, 7 o'clock. And then the following Monday, October 17th, the school board will have their forum at 7 o'clock, Civic Center.
Thank you for that. So we have a motion and a second for adjournment. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Again, thank you all for your attendance tonight.
Did you put anything else on the 26th?